What's happening, guys? Thanks for tuning in to this next segment of the Sunday Scaries portion of the podcast. In today's episode, I am joined by one of Pomp's Crypto Course's coaches, Morgan, along with two of my friends, Lawrence and Nick. In today's conversation, we talked a number of things, primarily focused around the big news over the week, which was Strike integrating their API into Twitter and allowing users to tip one another via the Bitcoin network. Huge news. We also talked a little bit about the 100,000th China ban. We talked a little bit about Ukraine and as well as some speculation around Panama. So a little bit of geopolitics going on in terms of Bitcoin. But overall, guys, I'll let y'all dive in. Here's the show. And for those that don't know, like Mahlers does like all his recordings in this women's closet. After watching this video, I totally understand now why he's in this women's closet, because the view is like absolutely amazing of like the Chicago skyline. So I hope, let me know if you guys can hear this audio or not.
Yo, we're here in Chicago. And we've got David here in a Starbucks in El Salvador. David has his Strike account linked to his Twitter account, and we're going to make a free, instant cash final remittance payment over Twitter. I'm going to go search David's Twitter account. I'm going to find his tips button, and I'm going to send David $10 over Twitter for changing the world. I'm going to open my non-custodial Lightning Moon wallet. Anyone in the world can download, and I'm just going to hit send. Boom. We just made an instant free remittance payment from Chicago, Illinois, USA to San Salvador, El Salvador over Twitter. Why would anyone ever use Western Union again? When you take one of the world's largest social internet networks, and you combine it with the world's best open monetary network, Twitter accidentally becomes one of the best remitting experiences in the world. This one singular payment standard and this one singular open monetary global monetary network dematerializing all existing monetary. Western Union, on to E4. Your move.
And mic drop.
On to E4, man.
Absolute mic drop. What seems like, what I don't understand is like how did this video only have that many likes?
Yeah, we're here in Chicago.
Like I don't understand at all.
I think it's because we're early. You know,
well, that's what
I think a lot of people.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. You know, like I sent that tweet out. I was just like, my normie friends like aren't hyped about this announcement, and I'm like, holy fuck, we're still early. Like if you
I mean,
late, like yeah, exactly.
I was talking to my roommate. My roommate is a computer science major, and so he already works at this fund, and he builds models for them, and he actually like models the energy grid. Oh, hey, that's my profile there.
Yes.
But anyway, I was talking to him about it, and he's like a computer science dude, right? Like he already knows kind of the way these things are built out, right? I think he'd kind of get a little bit of why this is super awesome. He was like, yeah, that's cool. Like, what are we going to do with it? And I was just like, oh my gosh. Like, I think a lot of people just aren't, like if they've got their discipline, right? It might be like computer science, it might be business or whatever. Sometimes it's hard to step out of that and see like, what are the global implications, right? Like even beyond just like your hometown, right? Your home country. This changes the lives of people who live very far away from me, right? In a very substantial way. And so like, I think it takes like a certain kind of person to be kind of aware of that. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, 100. I mean, just like, and like what a lot of people don't realize too when it comes to like remittance payments is that like especially like El Salvadorians, or like anybody in like an emerging market country that is leaving their home to go make money elsewhere, like the jobs that they are getting oftentimes aren't high paying jobs. So not half, but I mean, like, I think the fee's like 30% on a Western Union wire transfer, like 30% to them on the money they're making that they already need to A, pay for their own living expenses in another country, and then B, pay for their family's living expenses in another country. Like, what are they left with? And then they're
Yeah,
Go ahead, Lawrence.
I was gonna say, yeah, and that's the point, man. Is that like anybody who tries to rail against this thing, you don't understand like humans, right? It's like people are having their values stolen from them, right? And it's like these are literally just trolls that are just sitting along a payment rail that are collecting these ridiculous fees because there were no other options. Well, now we have another option, and it's an infinitely better option. So yeah, pawn to E4, man. Like it is what it is.
Yeah, I think another thing that, like, I mean, I don't know how accurate some of these statistics are, but just to, like, put it to scale a bit.
You want to throw them up?
I literally just Googled. I don't know if these are legit, but like, even if they're,
He's backing off a little bit.
He's like,
hey, this could be true, but hey, I don't know.
But even if they're
do your own
close,
research.
even if they're close, yeah, exactly. Not financially, but even if they're close, I mean, Venmo has 70 million users. Twitter has hundreds of millions of users. I mean, the value that Venmo has is the size of its network. Twitter dwarfs Venmo's network, and so, because like some of my friends were texting me, "What does this mean for Venmo?" I'm like, I don't know. How don't you see it? I shouldn't have to say it out loud.
And I think the crazy thing about that, right, is, when you, and I think Jack was also going off about this on the Best Business Show, Pop's Best Business Show yesterday. But when you look at like the valuation for companies like PayPal and Venmo, right, it's fundamentally built on the network that they can build, right? So like those valuations are in, a direct proportion to the networks that they're actually building. Excuse me. And the Lightning Network, because it's open and anybody can build on it. Now Twitter's just like plugged into this open permissionless network where it's just way more valuable from day one because they didn't actually have to build the network themselves. Others are going to develop on it and make it better. And it's open. Anybody can use it. And so they've completely leapfrogged these other companies overnight, to your point, Nick. It's just phenomenal.
Yep.
No, absolutely. Well, and like the other point that like Mahlers was making too is like not only is he combining like one of the biggest like media platforms in existence, but to combine like the social aspect and like the free and open, like most decentralized form of money aspect to something that's, I mean, you can argue Twitter is technically not free, but it is a platform that anybody can access and like at least get on now, like that is huge. Absolutely huge. And then you have Western Union, which the tweet of yours, Morgan, that I had pulled up here for those listening. So Western Union tweets this out, and they tweeted this out like, what was that? September 21st was Wednesday? No, Monday. So when I read this, I was like, did they know that like Strike was going to put this out? Was this like an attempt to like mitigate like blowback or whatever? But anyway, so the tweet here reads like, so Western Union is committed to enabling 300 million people to digitally connect to the global economy through mobile wallets by 2025. This commitment is part of launching the 1 Billion Lives Challenge with the World Economic Forum. I don't even know what that Edison Alliance. I don't even know what that is. But 2025.
Yeah, somebody, like, the funny thing is somebody over there is like, this is a good idea.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, okay, I don't blame them. They have to do something, right? Like at this point, their business is being disrupted in front of their face, and so like they have to do something. And so like these larger institutions, like they're not stupid, right? Like what people at Western Union are stupid, but like they just move a lot slower, and they have to do it within this antiquated framework of like this bureaucracy, and it's not open, right? It's just this walled garden, and so they're just going to move slower than the world actually needs right now.
I mean, honestly, the only move that Western Union I think could make would be to integrate Strike's API into their services.
Exactly.
Like
I mean, at this point, right? That's why it's pawn to E4.
Exactly. So I'm curious if like this was just a weird coincidental tweet, or like if somehow like word had gotten to them from Strike, which would be very interesting because Strike isn't a very big team. I think the entire company only has about 40-ish employees.
Yeah, it's not big at all.
It could have been just in reaction to, the El Salvador news, because, CNBC blasted that article talking about how damaging that was going to be to their yearly business and the amount of money they could potentially lose. So it's probably just in reaction to that. And then, Mallards just happened to, step on their neck after they sent that tweet out.
Yeah, and the thing that I love about, the tweet that I made too is like, I was telling people like, this too late, like we're doing this today, right? Like this isn't a technology that we need to wait for. Like it's already here. The Lightning Network is ready, right? It's ready to take this on. And I think that's something that people, even within the Bitcoin community, kind of don't really understand, that this network, right? It's already ready to go, right? Like this is up and running. People are using it every day. A whole country was ready to be onboarded. And, the Lightning Network, right? There was no hiccups at all with that. And a whole nation state is using it to do payments every day. So this thing is like, people are like, oh yeah, the Lightning Network will change the world. Like it's coming, right? It's already here. And people really need to wake up to that, especially these larger companies, and plug in, or else, as Kiki was saying, right, I love Kiki, but it's going to go the way that Blockbuster did. So
Exactly.
Yeah. To try to get like some of my friends kind of on board, like I tell them about Bitcoin and, they subscribe to my Substack and stuff. And I'm just, they probably get like annoyed about how much I talk about it. But now, like whenever, like if we go on trips, instead of using Venmo, like if we're just like, we're not going to like split the bill every time we go out to dinner or we go get drinks or whatever, I make them download Strike. I'm like, I won't pay you unless you download 100%.
Strike. Because it's the only way I can get money into Strike, dude. Only way. I can't get it in other way. $25 limit every 2 weeks, dude.
That's you. I don't have that issue, so I'm sorry. Yeah. But anyway, it's like I make, and then like for like my buddy's, for my buddy's birthday, like I'm just like I'm gonna send you some Bitcoin. Like you just you don't have a choice. We'll shove it down their throat, and they'll be glad.
Morgan and I must have like Googled something that was like naughty,
dude.
For like the banks must have like a hold or so. I don't.
I don't know. I think it had something to do because for Pop's crypto course, I was like sending people like 10 sats at a time, 5 sats at a time, and they'd be people that I didn't actually have in my contact book. So I'd like add them and then immediately send like a tiny denomination payment. Mm-hmm. And they were probably like, "Oh, that's sus." So I have a feeling
I was doing that on Twitter for a while too, to people in Spaces.
There you go.
That probably makes sense too.
That's it.
But okay, so let's segue into this because we were kind of talking about El Salvador, and I just want to give like a quick update as to like kind of what's going on down south. Considering, I mean, we really should be like like the world really should have like all eyes on El Salvador because there's nothing like this has ever existed in history. So. Great article here from Bitcoin Magazine, inside El Salvador's Bitcoin Law implementation. This is from September 23rd, so fairly recent considering we're only 2 days out from that. But this is taken from one of the Bitcoin Magazine podcasts here, so it's an excerpt of it. So let's dive into this. Earlier this month, El Salvador officially implemented its revolutionary Bitcoin law, recognizing Bitcoin as legal tender, compelling businesses across the country to accept the currency, and introducing a state-sponsored Bitcoin wallet called Chivo. The date was generally celebrated by international Bitcoin community, but to share a more precise account of what this implementation meant for Salvadorians, Bitcoin Magazine hosted a Twitter Spaces discussion between several Bitcoiners with a first-hand experience in the country. So after spending 10 days in El Zante, El Salvador's infamous Bitcoin beach, before the bill officially went into effect, Bitcoin Magazine's Aaron Van Werdum said that he was impressed by the level of real-life Bitcoin use that he saw. El Zante is a very cool initiative. It's really great. These bottom-up projects, he said, it's really kind of working. It's inspirational. But then, traveling to the country's capital of San Salvador, he was left with a different impression. Immediately, I realized that there is a very big contrast. Like you, like you have Bitcoin Beach and it's sort of this small citadel at sea, he said, but the rest of the country was still very far from adopting Bitcoin on any sort of large scale. Following the enactment of the bill on September 7th, 2021, Van Wertham offered two ways of looking at El Salvador's attempted transition to become the first Bitcoin nation, a glass half full perspective and a less rosy one. He noted that McDonald's and Pizza Hut franchises in the country accepted Bitcoin, representing noteworthy adoption of global businesses that came directly as a result of the Bitcoin bill. The country's state-sponsored Chivo wallet did officially launch, and some were able to download and use it, but he noted the transition did not go as well as it might have. So let's stop there real quick. A couple things I note. So Starbucks also has been accepting Bitcoin as payment. So that's huge when you have like three big chains already able to implement it instantly, or pretty much in a very short time period. That's big. So it'll be interesting to hear if like the corporate McDonald's and Pizza Hut and Starbucks announce that they have Bitcoin on their balance sheet. I know their like business model is primarily like franchise based, so I don't know if that technically counts, but it would be interesting to see on that. Also, let's talk about like the differences a little bit between like El Zante and like the rest of the country. Personally, what Aaron is saying here, like, I think that's pretty much a given, considering like El Zante has been like the mecca of Bitcoin usage and purchases. They've had a way bigger head start than the rest of the country, and it's been that way for a long time. Like outside of El Zante, like you didn't have people transacting with Bitcoin. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what from the multiple sources I've read, like that's what I understand.
Yeah, for sure. It was definitely a tale of two cities almost, with the Bitcoin Beach kind of citadel and just regular El Salvadorian life, Interesting thing for me on that with the big businesses is that I'm pretty sure it was Open Node that they used for that integration for the larger businesses. But the thing that I'm kind of bullish on about that is that, once that problem is solved, large scale corporations know and understand if we need to integrate Bitcoin, how do we do it? Who do we call? Who can solve this problem for us? Well, that X has been solved for now. So that means, the next time around, it's easier for other corporations to have the confidence to say, we need to do something quickly if this is important to us. Well, now there's kind of a roadmap for how to do that. So that's one of the bullish things that I see in that.
Yeah,
And Lawrence,
Lawrence.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say too, like now that Strike has opened its API, right now these companies can actually go build their own implementations, right? The solution is here. So totally. I mean, I think like companies are going to use kind of third-party stuff. I think they're going to build their own things. But as Jack Mallers always says, the more network participants, right, they're additive. And the more people start building their own implementations, start using the network, plugging it in, the stronger it gets. So I totally agree. Super bullish.
Yeah. And some of those companies, like you said, Alan, like they have the franchise model. And so, but either way, like it ladders up to corporate in some way. Like those are huge global companies, McDonald's, Starbucks, so like they'll be able to, I'd imagine, maybe more easily implement outside of that country because they kind of already had their test case done.
Yeah. So here's like kind of where like my thoughts go is like, are they going to make this available? Like, because the U.S. is one of the biggest users of Bitcoin outside of like Eastern Europe and like El Salvador. Do you guys think that these companies are going to allow here in the near future, maybe 2021, maybe 2022, the purchase of their products in Bitcoin? Or do you think it's going to roll out first in places like Ukraine, Panama, or maybe even not? Maybe it's going to take enacting another law like El Salvador to kind of force these companies to accept it more.
I think a lot of the big companies will take the lead from the regulators. Like, I don't know. I'm not sure that McDonald's wants to be on the shit list of, all the politicians and stuff. So maybe some smaller companies, but I'd imagine a lot of the large ones would wait for something like the El Salvador bill to get passed.
What if you're like a franchisee owner though, and you're like, hey, do franchisees owners have the liberty to do that technically?
I'm not sure.
Probably
I have
depends.
no idea.
I do know with OpenNode though, like the reason why I think those companies use OpenNode is because OpenNode just facilitates the payment in Bitcoin. Like there's easy options for them to just say, yes, we accepted it in Bitcoin, but convert it right over to USD. So that doesn't mean they're technically, holding Bitcoin, for the franchise or on their balance sheet just because they were able to process the payment in Bitcoin. So for that reason, it leads me to believe that once that problem has been kind of solved, I see no reason why. I see no reason why one of these large franchises in 2022 or something like that wouldn't start facilitating Bitcoin payments, because there's no additional risk for them. There's just the kind of halo effect of people want to pay in this, we'll take it. They probably won't hold it, but I see no reason why they wouldn't try to inspire more purchases by offering another payment option.
I certainly think the regulatory landscape within the U.S. is slightly hostile towards Bitcoin right now, as far as like making payments with Bitcoin. But Strike has figured out a way around that, right? Like Strike, you can use the Bitcoin network, Lawrence, as you were saying earlier, right, without actually interfacing with Bitcoin, the asset. And so I wonder if that's the path that a lot of companies will take in the U.S., where they figure out how to basically use the Lightning Network, use the Bitcoin network, without actually touching the asset itself, because I think, as you're saying, that removes a ton of risk for them, both from a regulatory standpoint and from a volatility standpoint.
Yeah, I think
sort of like roundabout hyper Bitcoinization.
I think it's the Trojan horse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like that's like the first step. You're like, okay, we're using the network. And then it becomes a little bit more widespread. And then, these companies actually do have a lot of weight. We know that kind of money makes the world go around. So maybe that's a good thing, right?
It's just so weird, because for like a decade now, like things have been very grassroots from the bottom up, not a lot of regulation at play, not a ton of like big company. And I've been saying this for like a couple months now, that like 2021 marks the start of like the big Bitcoin companies. Like there are companies alive and here today that are going to be the next like Apple, the next Microsoft, the next Amazon per se, and I think Strike, I think Strike is going to be one of those companies. Like it's gotta be. Same with like Square Crypto and Square Cash. Like what they're doing, I don't understand how people don't recognize this. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't know. Maybe the smart people at the top and the powers that be, like they see what's coming and they don't want to they want to get in on it as much as like we do, without alarming the rest of like the general population to flood in.
Yeah, I'm definitely +1 on those big companies, and I'm long Square. But if you think that Jack is gonna introduce Lightning payments on Twitter, and it's not, the whole world then instantly goes, when Cash App. You know what I mean? If you don't think Lightning is quickly coming on the heels of that to Cash App, I think that's a losing bet. You know what I mean? In my opinion.
Especially, and you look at like all the hiring he's been doing over the last couple of months, and like the expansion of he is all his eggs. He's like, don't get me wrong, the Twitter implementation is great, but like where he's really trying to like lead the charge and like development is definitely Square. Hands down. Yeah,
I tell people all the time, Square Jack is greater than Twitter Jack. Without question.
Exactly. All right,
he's certainly more excited to be Square Jack than Twitter Jack, I think. Like every time he has to talk about Twitter, he's like, oh man, it reminds me of that meme, right? Where he's just like, I forget who it is. It's some actor and he's smoking a cig, but he just looks so distraught and just run down.
Ben Affleck.
That's like, he's just Ben Affleck. That's the one. Yeah. That's Twitter Jack, right? Yeah, exactly, Lawrence. That was uncanny. He's here in the room with us.
And then there's the other smoking one. I think it's what's his name? Not Daniel Craig. It's not Daniel Craig. It's why can't I think of it? He's in Dallas Buyers Club, and Matthew McConaughey, where he's like wide-eyed, like on meth or whatever. That's Square Jack. Super excited.
That's Square Jack. He's hyped.
He's hyped.
He's focused.
Ready to talk. Okay, let's power through this. So now, coming back into the article, so we were talking about how Kibo Wallet launched. and that like the implementation hasn't been as great in like the rest of the country as it has been in El Zante. So now that the glass half empty perspective is that it's definitely not widespread yet. Van Rajum explained, you definitely can't spend Bitcoin everywhere yet. And still a lot of people have no idea what this is or how it works. And also the Chivo app, for example, has a lot of issues. Like I mentioned, some people could download it, but lots of people could not download it. It was very buggy. And if you did try to use it, sometimes it will work. Sometimes it would not. The user interface is a little bit confusing. The participants also noted that while Chivo granted everyone in El Salvador $30 in Bitcoin, these funds can only be sent to other Chivo applications, essentially creating a custodial solution with many of the same problems as central bank-controlled fiat currencies. I didn't know that, actually. I think.
Wait a second. Yeah, I didn't know that either.
That's interesting. We'll revisit that here in a sec. So still, Van Werdum said that Bitcoin is being more actively used in El Salvador than he would have thought 6 weeks ago. Sergej Kotilar, the CEO of Bitcoin for gift card company merchant BitRefill, emphasized a high volume of orders coming from El Salvador on the launch day, saying that he got 40,000 orders in 3 hours, 10 times what the platform normally sees. He also offered some insight into how Chivo was built and launched and the potential reasons for its limitations. The Chivo app is built by 4 or 5 different teams, which is why there are inconsistencies in the app, he said. A lot of this stuff in terms of the Chivo wallet, Bitcoiners complain about how it's custodial and it's centralized and you need to submit your own private information and that it's limited in functionality. But if you put it in perspective, I mean, this is a government project to build a Bitcoin wallet, and they had 3 months from the presidential announcement to keep building out something that, well, it works for some people. Kotliar added that his team is providing feedback on how the government can improve Chivo and that he's hopeful additional improvements will be made. So, yeah, I think a lot of great points there. And a lot of things that haven't really been addressed either. So, like, yeah, the wallet was rolled out in 3 months. That is like a feat of like technical app development and engineering in and of itself. Like, to be able to produce an app in 3 months and like expect everybody to successfully use it, like, you can't, like, that's like not doable. Nothing short of a miracle. As close to a miracle as much as Bitcoin itself is a miracle. So the fact that people are being able to use it to some capacity, that's great. I'm sure like they're working tirelessly over there to get things working. But keep in mind, like, going back to what we're talking about, how Bitcoin for the last decade has been grassroots. Like, this is very not grassroots. This is very like not natural growth. This is like all of a sudden imposing on an entire country of people like, hey, like, we're still going to use the dollar, but you also now have the option to use Bitcoin. And if you're a merchant, you have to accept Bitcoin as tender.
Yep. Yeah. So like, definitely the Chivo wallet was like a Herculean effort to get that off. I don't know the article you're citing here, Alan. Is this like a day one article that was written? Because I know there were several issues with Chivo wallet, and a lot of people in the community have been talking about the fact that the fixes that they've rolled out for that wallet have been very, very timely. They've been really, really quick to iterate and change those things, which is, good to see. And then I think Bitcoiners, remember it is a government project here. You know what I mean? You're not going to receive self-sovereignty and all that kind of stuff inside of a government initiative. You know what I mean? So yeah, good luck with that. Like, it's never going to happen.
Also, the thing that I'll say is, because it's an open network, you don't actually have to use the Chivo wallet. So I actually know some people who are from El Salvador, whose families are back in El Salvador. And, like, they were kind of aware of Bitcoin. They don't really care about like Bitcoin as like a mission. But they're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Now I have access to like all these financial services that I didn't before. Like, trying to transfer money between banks was a pain in the ass. This solves that. And a lot of them use Strike. A lot of them use like different wallets that I haven't even heard of. And actually, if you go to like the App Store and you like put your VPN in El Salvador and you just look up Bitcoin wallet, there's like hundreds of results. So there's lots of alternatives to this thing. mean, if I was in El Salvador, I definitely would not be using the government-sponsored wallet, especially if I could only send it to other government-sponsored wallets. But that's just because I don't really trust the government very much. Any national government, even if they're sort of purport to be Bitcoin friendly, but there are alternatives out there, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and I think the only reason, like, if I were down there and like able to download the Chivo wallet, like I would have downloaded it just to get the $30 worth of Bitcoin. Just because me,
100%.
the hardcore Bitcoiner that I am, I'm like, that $30 is going to be worth like 30,000.
Just a fiend.
Yeah, right. I'm like, whatever.
I gotta have it.
Whatever
30 is worth
Bitcoin I can
30,000.
get, like, give it to me. But so yeah, I didn't know that you could only like transfer it to like other government wallets. Like that can't be correct though, because how else were you supposed to spend it? Like how could you spend?
Yeah, I'm doing a little research right now. I'm like typing and clicking. So
as far as I knew, I think that might have came because when it first happened, there was something where like if you just received it, you couldn't immediately send it off the Chivo platform. It had to make like 1 or 2 moves prior to you being able to send it to another non-custodial wallet. At least that's what I had heard, through people kind of saying what it was like. Because day one, a lot of people were like, it's ridiculous, you can't send it off. But then people later discovered if you made a payment or made a 1 or 2 moves of the initial $30, you could move it off. Oh, that was the other thing. It was just with that initial $30. It wasn't like with anything else that you loaded onto it. Just those initial government bucks, I guess.
Gotcha. Still not. I wouldn't be using a government wallet, but
yeah, I mean, if you go to the Chivo website, they say you can send it without intermediaries. You
want to share that real quick?
Yeah, I can share it real quick. But here's the Chivo wallet here, Brave tab. Right. So these are like the features that they're talking about, right? So I wonder if it's just for the initial $30. So that's what I'll say.
Gotcha.
I mean, that's what I believe. And plus, if you're looking at what a government's up to, anytime they spend money, they're always incentivized to show what that money did. We put this money, it stayed within our economy for this amount of time. We gave out this amount of money, and it was injected into the economy to, this tune of how much spending or this percentage. So, they're incentivized, obviously, to keep the money there. And that's what they put it there for, to kind of get the economy going. So that's what I believe.
Most definitely. So let's power through the rest of this. To answer your question, Lawrence, too, this was written on the 23rd, but I think this is coming from that Twitter space that CK and Bitcoin Magazine had. I think that was about a week ago. So little, I mean, still 7 days. I don't know. I always joke, 7 days and Bitcoin is like a year. So shit happens so fast. But anyways, but some have been less positive about the nature of Chivo's rollout, questioning whether you can really call it El Salvador's state-sponsored adoption a true Bitcoin initiative. Mario Gomez, the founder of Hackerspace San Salvador and an outspoken critic of the law's rollout who was detained by the country's national police, offered nuance on the perspective. So Mario was actually in this Twitter space, which was very interesting because he was arrested the week before very briefly. And they had mentioned that in the Twitter space. But anyways, the way the Chivo application is working, it looks like more of a centralized system. On only when you interact with external wallets, it actually connects to the main chain or with the Lightning Network, he explained. Whatever the government releases is not truly Bitcoin. It looks like a centralized banking system. Van Werdum pressed Gomez, asking him to clarify his specific issues with Chivo and a lack of transparency around how government funds have been used in this rollout, how the wallet actually works, and details around its BTC custody. I think all of this lack of transparency is giving a really bad image not only to Bitcoin, but it removes any reason for us to trust these government wallets, Gomez said. Why am I going to trust this application if they're not going to give us any details about how it works, how the money is spent? So I think that is not acceptable as a citizen.
That's a perfectly fair criticism just from where I'm sitting. It doesn't sound like he's criticizing the fact that they're rolling out Bitcoin. It sounds like he's just criticizing the way in which they're doing it and a lack of transparency, right? I think we're all a fan of greater transparency here.
Yeah, I mean, definitely as Bitcoiners here for sure. That's first and foremost. I mean, the other thing you got to realize too is like I always go back and forth. Like I think it's so fantastic that Bukele was like the first world leader to implement a law like this. But when you like set emotion aside and like you put yourself in the shoes of like, I don't want to call him a dictator because I don't know if that's like the right term.
He's not. He's the president.
I know he's the president. I know he's the
dictator.
president, but
He's
there's
not.
some actions that he has taken that are very non-democratic.
Well, let's call him by his official title,
So,
just for the purposes of this video.
For the purposes, President Bukele, great guy, implemented a great law, but from the standpoint of a country that has been off, I don't think they've used the El Salvadorian colon since the 90s. And since then, they've been a fully dollarized country. So they haven't been for over 2 decades in control of their own monetary policy. They've been beholden to the United States government. And like, yeah, obviously it makes sense for them to take on Bitcoin as a second form of legal tender because, again, they're not really leaving a system. They're like just adapting to an already like to a system that they're already like in and used to. But I think from Bukele's perspective, like for him, Bitcoin gives him a little bit more control, especially like if they're the ones buying large quantitative sums of Bitcoin. And then the only way for like citizens to get it is like through their wallet, dispersal of that wallet. Granted, there's like other ways it could be done. Like as people like travel, come in and use like other wallets, then like, yeah, more Bitcoin will enter the country. But as of right now, like really the only funnel for all that Bitcoin is the government. So in a way, yeah, I think it is a fair criticism. Like they've centralized, that app has centralized a decentralized application.
See, that was the thing, man. I know I made a couple of comments on Twitter as well after reading some articles and, quite honestly, in spaces listening to people who are actually Salvadorian, right? And they were saying for a lot of their citizens, their concerns were, they got a hugely popular president. He owns all the power in their, Senate, Congress, whatever they call their house over there. And that's the only way he could push something through like this so quickly, know with absolute certainty it would go through. And a lot of their citizens, when they got dollarized, that hurt the citizens of that country deeply from a financial perspective. So a lot of people, almost like with PTSD, saw the same thing happening over again with Bitcoin. Here we are sitting over in the Western world going, no, Bitcoin is awesome. It's actually like great, for controlling or for, ceding government control and things like that. But they're like, nah, man, we've seen this movie before and we didn't like how it ended, So they were, I would say justifiably so, hesitant in saying, no, there's this thing that you just talked about a short time ago. And now we have to take it as payment and everybody's getting this wallet and we don't know what it is. So, yeah, I think the criticisms are very fair in it. And I think it also can show that, like, from a political standpoint, it doesn't matter how it doesn't matter how good your message is or your action is, the method in which you introduce it to people or that, or the way it's implemented, can leave you open to tons of criticism, even if the net result ultimately is a positive.
Yeah, I think. Nick, go for it.
I was going to say, I agree. Like if I'm them and seeing how fast this happened, what will the next thing be? And the next thing might not be freedom money. So it's like you said, Alan. Some of the criticisms I've seen on, I don't know anything about him personally, but some of the criticisms by like Alex Gladstein and some other folks of Bukele on Twitter are certainly it's just something to keep an eye on. Hopefully he has the best intentions with it, but it might be, they might be purely cynical, so we'll see. I think, like you said, like all eyes should be on El Salvador.
I think one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin is that it's inherently an opt-in system, right? When we're born, in the US or in Europe or in China or in Africa or wherever, right? Like we are kind of assigned a name, we're kind of assigned a citizenship, and then we have to prescribe to like this currency, right? So that's a very much not opt-in, it's coercive. Like I grew up using dollars and there was a whole group of people who didn't get to use dollars for whatever reason, just because like their local jurisdiction, that wasn't what was prescribed. And so Bitcoin's very much not that way, right? Like you can choose to use Bitcoin or you don't have to, right? Like nobody's forcing you to actually use it. And so when we see the way that this law is implemented in El Salvador, and it all of a sudden becomes kind of this coercive feeling thing where it's all of a sudden I have to use Bitcoin, like I think that actually goes against a lot of the principles that the community stands for. And I think, again, as we're talking about, like Bitcoin is great, right? Like we all believe in sort of like the validity of Bitcoin and what it can do for people, but the implementation really does matter, right? And if it's not opt-in, I think that leaves a bad taste. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I would leave a bad taste in the mouths of Salvadorians, especially if they've kind of experienced this monetary volatility, in their lifetime.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think two takeaways from that. If you're not a merchant and you're just a buyer, technically it is opt-in. Like it's not like they got rid of dollars. Like you can still use dollars. The sucky thing is if you want to use solely Bitcoin, it's kind of difficult right now because not every merchant, it's not that they don't want to accept it. I'm sure there's some holdouts, but like it's more so they don't have the means or ways yet of implementing a successful way to like accept Bitcoin as payment. So that's an issue. The other takeaway, and the thing this is always important to bring up in comparison to the sea of other shit coins in the space and altcoins in the space, is that like it doesn't matter how much consolidation and control Bukele or the government tries to do here, because the base layer at the very end of the day is decentralized. There will always be ways around it, and there will always be better ways of doing something, whether it's your free and open source developers developing a better wallet for the masses, which we already know there's plenty out there, from ATMs to payment processors to everything. Like they already all exist. They just like need to make their way down there. And unfortunately, a lot of them are, but so are a lot of scammers too. So I think it's one of those things. There's just a lot of growing pains over the course of the next year. But personally, I think I'm very hopeful for the rollout. I think it's going to be successful, and I think it's going to be a model for the rest of the world to see.
I totally agree. And before we move on, I just want to do one last point. What you were saying before is, it could be a move to consolidate power, right? Whatever, the government's kind of dictating the implementation of this thing. That's going to backfire, right? If that's his goal, right? We don't know if that's his goal, and I don't want to assume any intentions, but when you're plugging into freedom money, those ideals are going to trickle down into the rest of society. And all of a sudden, when you empower people financially, they can take control of their own lives, right? They can have sovereignty over how they spend their time, how they translate value into the future. And I think over time, right, it might take time, but over time, that's giving people more freedoms, and that's just going to create a more free and open society. That's what I believe.
Yeah, and just based off of the way Bukele talks too, I don't think it's very reasonable to assume that he's trying to consolidate power. I mean, if you've listened to his speeches, he's always talking about like the best way to instill hope into the people of his country is to create opportunity. And you obviously can't create opportunity if you consolidate power and stifle because you stifle innovation that way. And from his actions, I mean, you see he's rediverted resources into hospitals, schools. He's been very vocal about the best way to get rid of gang violence is imprisonment or police force. It's by creating opportunities such as jobs and other things in the economy that will incentivize people not to go for a life of crime, but rather go for these better opportunities that are about. So, yeah, we can speculate on that stuff all day, but I do want to get to some of these other topics that we have on here. So we're going to do a slow little drum roll for the biggest announcement of the day, and I think it might be very detrimental to Bitcoin as a whole. China has banned Bitcoin again.
Oh no! Bitcoin's over.
Face melting.
It's over, guys. Pack your bags.
We're done. No, obviously,
we're done.
Obviously, I'm kidding. I believe China this year alone has banned Bitcoin 3, maybe 4 times. But I didn't even know it was possible for them to ban it again after their last ban. I mean, they literally shoved all of the hash power out of the country. Like, I don't know what is left for them to get rid of aside from, like, I guess transactions, wallet store. Like, I mean, how are you going to? I don't know.
And that's what's happening here is they're banning all cryptocurrency transactions.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of the aspect. So before it was like, okay, we don't want miners. Now it's like, okay, we don't actually people moving the stuff around. So I don't know if it's like if anything is said about possession of those cryptocurrencies, but I know like moving it within the country is a big no now.
Gotcha.
I would say, would this be considered like the kitchen sink ban from them? Like what like you said, like what is left to ban?
Yeah, I thought they were banning the ban. I was confused. I'm joking. Hey, this is one dude that I follow on Twitter and Clubhouse, Ben Tristan. He has a great way of looking at the potential bans of Bitcoin. He has an acronym, METH. Don't get hooked on it. But he says you have to look at them at 4 different perspectives: mining, exchanges, transactions, and holding. So that like really stuck in my head. I was like, dude, that's perfect. So I'm going to keep repeating it. I'm going to keep giving him credit for it. But yeah, there's, essentially those 4 aspects from which, in a regulatory stance or a state operator, you would look to, stop it.
Great. I'm going to remember that too. That's actually fantastic and a great way to think about it. But let's go through this article here. I think this is a great article. Again, super recent. The China ban is good for why the China ban is good for Bitcoin. Which I think it might be more through the lens of like Westerners. It's definitely very good for Westerners. Definitely not good for the people of China, that's for sure. But anyway, so today news surfaced that China has issued a final and complete ban. We'll see. Well, final. We'll see what that means here in like 3 months. Harsh, it seems, right? Headlines like the likes of China declares cryptocurrency transactions illegal, Bitcoin price falls, invoke a sense that not only this is big news, but also that Bitcoin suffers from it. Well, despite a couple of daily red candles, both are wrong. China has been trying to ban Bitcoin for years. The first time the Chinese government sought to prohibit the use of Bitcoin in the country took place in 2013, only a few years after Bitcoin was born. Since then, Bitcoin price in US dollars has capitulated. Bitcoin is up over 40,000 since the first China ban. Zoom out, so that's very funny to see. The CCP hasn't understood it yet, but Bitcoin cannot be banned. It's a fool's errand, not only because Bitcoin is peer-to-peer, distributed network instead of centralized, easy to be controlled one, but also because of the game theoretic aspect of adoption. If one country bans Bitcoin but another welcomes it, capital and people will flock to where they are treated best. The economic incentives are aligned for a country to accept Bitcoin rather than ban it. And then we got a chart here. So banning Bitcoin's prisoner's dilemma. So on the left side, we have country A bans Bitcoin, cooperates. And then below it, we have country A accepts Bitcoin, defects. And then at the top, country B bans Bitcoin, cooperates. Country B accepts Bitcoin, defects. So when we have both countries ban Bitcoin and cooperate, the top right square says Bitcoin wins. Ban fails, Bitcoin adoption accelerates, fiat currencies deteriorate more rapidly. And then below that, we say country A accepts Bitcoin and country B bans Bitcoin. Bitcoin wins, capital outflows from country B and capital inflows to country A. So we see this whenever innovation tries to be stifled, it leaves one country and goes to another country because country A sees the potential and it wants to take the potential away from country B. So that makes a lot of sense. Third scenario, so country A bans Bitcoin and country B accepts Bitcoin. Same thing, literally same outcome. Goes from one country over to another. And then at the bottom, country A accepts Bitcoin, country B accepts Bitcoin, Bitcoin wins. Everyone wins, benefits from trade and specialization. I don't think I have any disagreements with that, although it's interesting to see in comparison to a country like El Salvador that we were just talking about. I hate to bring the conversation back to that, but we are kind of in a situation here where like the U.S. is basically country A, and so is El Salvador is country B, with both accepting, be it that like states in the U.S. are like creating a a lot of pro like mining laws and like pro Bitcoin laws, and country B being El Salvador has already accepted Bitcoin. But it's one from like I think the way to look at this now that I'm thinking about it and working it through my head is that like country, I think, is in reference to government and people, whereas like El Salvador, it's government and it's most people. If that makes sense.
Of course it does, Alan. You said it.
right.
Here, I've got a funny meme. I'll send it to you, Alan, so you can share it.
Here,
on the
go
screen.
ahead, throw it up. I'll let you throw it up.
Okay. Here's like, we can go through the game theory and all that stuff. But I think memes are a great way to kind of like talk about what's really happening here. And so here we go. This is a simplified version of what you just talked about, right? China, Bitcoin ban, game theory.
Yeah.
They're going to shoot himself, right? Like that's what's happening here. Just to simplify it for people at home who don't really want to do like the game theory for themselves. It's going to hurt them at the end of the day is essentially what we're saying. So
for all those visual learners out there.
Yeah. For all the kids at home.
I was wondering when I'll see that chart when in economics textbooks.
Yeah.
Maybe like 100 years from now, they'll see that.
In my senior thesis, my honors thesis, I'm including memes for sure.
You have to. So, it's
love it.
The meme is the message, 100%.
Right? It is.
No, I telling you, in like 5 years, when like the first like Bitcoiner like finance textbooks come out, like they're going to be filled with me. I mean, everybody gets them. I mean, like it's literally like the greatest evolution of art and existence. More, you guys talk about it in Pop's crypto course all the time. It's like it's the memes.
Right.
If like art is 1,000 words, meme is 10,000 words.
Yeah. No, it's the synthesis of a really complex idea down into a couple words, and it just inspires people to go kind of dig a little deeper. But it also carries a message, right? And so I think that's just a great way to understand kind of what's happening in China. It's like, I think there's a couple of things going on. It's like, what's the enforceability of this ban, right? Because Bitcoin's such an open network, and it's just slippery, right? It'll get around controls. And then B, is it really in China's best interest, right? Are they shooting themselves in the foot with this move? And I think the answer to that question is definitely yes. That being said, right, like in the US, I think there's still a lot of questions about how Bitcoin's going to be regulated. I'll just pull up an email I got. So I emailed my senator. This is way back when, when we were actually really concerned about a lot of like the Bitcoin regulation that was going to be going through here in the US. And they emailed me back, right? So this is Dianne Feinstein. This is one of my senators. And I was like, hey, like, you guys got to like do smart regulation, right? Like regulation shouldn't be attached to must pass bills. In the end, right, our political process, I think like seeing any amendments kind of got nuked. And so it ended up passing anyway. But this is the gist, right? In their view, right, historically gaps in oversight and regulation of the financial system have contributed to financial instability, consumer protection problems, and increased criminal activity. I think this part is hilarious. They're still kind of harping on the criminal activity of Bitcoin. But, I think it's still a big question mark in my head whether or not the United States will be Bitcoin friendly along with El Salvador. Obviously, the China banning Bitcoin is kind of on non-news because they've done it so many times. We kind of know that it's not really going to affect Bitcoin in the long term. But the big question mark in my head is like, is the U.S. going to follow what China does, right? In a similar way to how we had lockdowns, right? The lockdowns in the U.S. were modeled after the lockdowns in China. Are we going to do that with Bitcoin regulation? That's my question for you guys.
It's interesting to think that like there's sort of a couple different extremes that they could go to combat what China's done, especially with them like rolling out their digital yuan. Like we could create our own CBDC, the digital dollar, or you could just go on the complete end of the other end of the spectrum and just adopt Bitcoin. I feel like both of those would be combating China just in different ways. To your point, I have no idea. I think I probably lean more towards the CBDC side, not as a proponent of it, but that's what they'll do. So it'll be interesting to see like how we decide to fight that, and what would be that rationale, kind of like what are like the pros and cons of both sides from their perspective.
Here's what I'll say is when authoritarian governments are opposing something that we're doing, right, in this case, building out Bitcoin, we're probably doing something right. And so I just really hope the U.S. doesn't feel the need to regulate Bitcoin in a similar manner.
I don't think it's going to happen for a number of reasons. One, like Gary Gensler is very pro. I mean, when you listen to the man talk, like, I mean, he's virtually saying that like everything but Bitcoin out there is a security, and Bitcoin should be treated as money. Everything else should be treated like as a security. So for one, like knowing that we have somebody like in like a position of power, like that is huge when they're saying things like that, at least for Bitcoin. The other thing, America is a country of innovation and creation, regardless of what you think in the political climate right now. Like that is what America is built on. And it would be very anti-American to not allow Americans to choose what kind of money they want to transact with. Now, what I do think you will see here, and I think this is a result of the government not doing its due diligence or proper planning, because let's be honest, like this is like a black swan event that Bitcoin comes out of nowhere. And now like you're either in the know on the ground floor, or you're finally this year just now starting to see the implications of fiat money versus having an option like Bitcoin to replace it. So I think what the government here in the US instead is going to try to do is to manufacture and create a lot of fun. Maybe not even the government themselves, but I can guarantee you that a lot of corporations who have a lot of funding, because it's in their best interest to still operate on the dollar, will continue pumping out FUD articles and FUD resources, because I think that's more of a viable option than the government going outright and banning it. Because Morgan, to your point, if the government does that, that's going to bring a swath of attention to Bitcoin. And considering the US is the biggest user of the network currently, that's only going to expedite the adoption of Bitcoin. And we saw this with like the TikTok ban that was attempted to go on last year. Like they were trying to ban TikTok because it was a Chinese company and there was like national security stuff that was like at risk, you know, at least for the greater populace. And like eventually like, and it's like, I'm thinking about, it's kind of funny because obviously they allowed it to exist because like the fiat incentive for them was so great to keep it rather than to ban it. But I think the same thing will kind of play out where there might be talk maybe down the road when we get closer to that point. But when you have states like Texas and Florida, Wyoming, you have big names like Cynthia Lumens, Ted Cruz, you have Mayor Suarez down in Miami, all just being these like big proponents of Bitcoin. In short, no, I just don't see how it could happen. I think certain states might take action. We've seen that. We've seen New York is a hellhole for any kind of like institutional finance like vehicles. But real quickly, states, and we've seen this with cannabis laws, that like the states that are very pro Bitcoin are going to see an influx of wealth into their states, and then other states real quickly are going to be like, we want this too.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about like anti-American ideas is like, or anti-American actions is like the more, I don't know, you think if like America collectively could look itself in the mirror and see us, you know, copying things that the CCP has done over in China. It's like, that's not what you don't want to see. You want to see as few similarities there as possible. So just wanted to add that.
On the regulatory front, you know, getting back to the acronym I talked about earlier, the one that could be attacked most clearly and plainly is clearly the exchanges, you know, the on and off ramps of how we get in and out of Bitcoin and these other cryptocurrencies. And I tell people all the time there's precedent for that, because I remember being a poker player and they passed the unlawful internet gaming enforcement act. They could not tell me, Lawrence, as a citizen, you can't use your money to play poker online. But what they could do is say, Bank of America, you are not allowed to send Lawrence's money to this offshore gaming site. So, you know, that's the most likely attack vector is the on and off ramps, and that would be the exchanges to try and make it more difficult for us to move money in and out of these different places. So beware, those are the places. Not your keys, not your coins. Don't leave your stuff on the exchange. It's a bad idea.
There was something like the other week that like freaked me out. I don't know if it was I don't know if it was an article that I read or something, but somebody was talking about that like Coinbase might be going the route of what Robinhood is doing, kind of with like they don't actually hold any like Bitcoin on their balance sheet. It's more of just like pegged to whatever the current price is, and it's just like a fake like IOU. And like that scares me because like I know from like especially from like the conversations we've had with like current cohort classes that so many people have their money on an exchange like Coinbase and like don't really understand like the implications of like storing large quantities of Bitcoin or anything else like on there. Like it's just like you, like Lawrence, like you said, like you just, somebody in the cohort was saying like, I don't think it's really worth it. Like no one's going to like hack or steal it. And I'm like, no, the government's already done it once. It was a long time ago, but like when they're threatened and backed in a quarter and they did like, it's going to lash out like a scared dog and they're going to make irrational decisions regardless of like what like the masses truly need.
And that's the crazy thing. It's like, because for one, you know, governments are governments, you know what I mean? I do not trust them, right? So like, you know, it looks like Bitcoin is, you know, by Gensler's word, safe, but that's for now. Who knows what that looks like later down the line. But the thing is, when you're dealing in anything other than Bitcoin, especially with the exchange that you're either dealing with or where you're, you shouldn't be. But if you're keeping your coins there, you inherit all the risk of all those other coins. So that means if they got 75 different, if they got 75 different securities on their site and you got your Bitcoin held there, you just inherited all that risk of those securities. So like, do you want to inherit that risk or do you want to define your risk? You know what I mean? And that's the thing, man. Just don't roll the dice, man. Especially don't roll the dice in a game you don't know shit about. Like that's ridiculous.
I know, like Coinbase is adding
a really good point, Lawrence.
Left sock coin. You know, every day they're adding a new coin, and so it's like you're totally right. It's like if left sock coin is a security and they make moves against sock coin, like they're going to make moves against the exchange. That's brilliant the way that you just framed it.
Totally agree. I think that more people need to hear it laid out like that, because like I've never heard somebody say it like that, and I think that's a great point. Like especially if you are somebody who says like, oh yeah, I like Bitcoin and maybe you like Ethereum and a couple other things, but like, oh yeah, all those other 50 to 1,000, they're all scams. And it's like, well, you're now affiliated with the scams, so
guilty by association.
Well, the most recent
Absolutely.
example of this, though, is the whole BlockFi incident from like a month and a half ago. Like obviously nobody's funds were locked up, but like when you see it, like an individual, I believe it was New Jersey made, where it's like, hey, you need to like cease and desist or like order. Like, imagine being a person in New Jersey with like your life savings locked up because you were drawn to by the high interest that's permitted, which don't get me wrong, it's great if you're thinking in terms of purely fiat, makes a lot of sense. But as you get further down the rabbit hole and you start to evaluate your wealth in just Bitcoin, you're like, I don't know if those percentage gains are really worth it. And I think that conversation needs to really be had more. Interesting, like with the Coinbase thing, I was recently on it because I was trying to help my mother get all of her stuff off onto she had just bought a cold card. She's like gotten super huge into like all this stuff, so I was over trying to help her out, and like I'm scrolling through Coinbase and I'm like, what are all these shit coin, because I remember Coinbase back when it was
Let's go take a look. I'll find the most outrageous ones while you're going.
Please do, because like I remember like when I first started, and this is a very common story, like I can say for certain that 90% of people who first purchase like Bitcoin or anything else start on Coinbase, because I think that's the most like easily accessible. Maybe Robinhood now or something, but back when I got in 2017, for me, it was Coinbase. That was like, I just Googled, how do I buy Bitcoin? Coinbase is what popped up. I did a little bit of research. I was like, okay, this sounds like a legit place. Holy shit, it's so many. But like when I first bought.
Go
ahead.
There are 117 pages of
pages.
Coins. 117
say coins.
No, 117 pages of coins. Look, this is four.
Wow.
Or sorry, of 177. It's even more than I originally thought. So
you can't. It looks like you can't
page.
trade all of them though.
Yeah, here's FanB token. Take a look at this, and that's a graph.
What is that chart? What is that?
What are those? What are those? God, I can't think of the name of it. It's like you shake it and you've got the little dials.
Yeah, exactly.
The Etch-a-Sketch.
Yeah. It's a lot better when you have the name of it.
Yeah,
the Etch-a-Sketch. That's exactly what it looks like.
Your wealth valuation on a chart should never look like an Etch-a-Sketch. That's when you know you fucked up.
For the record, on Coinbase, you cannot trade FanB token.
Okay.
But I'm sure a lot of these other tokens, you absolutely can trade them.
What a shame.
But yeah, so that's
big shame.
That was like my point I was going to make. So when I first got on Coinbase, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but it was only Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then like they had just rolled out Litecoin that was huge. And then the SegWit wars happened and Bitcoin Cash came on. And that was like a big deal. And then I don't know where things transitioned, but I remember for like a long time, it was just those 4 coins for a very long time. And then now it seems like every day they're just adding and adding and adding. And like you said, Lawrence, it's like, oh, you don't know like what this I'm sure there's a vetting process, especially for a publicly traded company like Coinbase, but there are plenty of other exchanges like, and there's a reason why Binance US is very limited in compared to like actual Binance, that like some platforms allow you to create your own coin there. Imagine going to the NYSE and like creating your own stock out of thin air.
And being able to list it and get people to list it.
It's like the listing part.
Listed IPO same day.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and you can, you can and pre-mine it, market it.
Yeah.
And then dump it. So
it's insane. It's totally insane. And people are like, this is the future tokenomics. This is great. And that's like, not the future I want to live in. Definitely not. We're getting a little sidetracked here. I do want to wrap up this article, this China article. So curious thing, another thing I was thinking about. So I don't know if this announcement of China banning Bitcoin has anything to do with Evergrande and that whole fiasco. But I know a lot of CCP party members have like crucified Evergrande because they were built on capitalistic ideals, and they were like, for those that don't know, like Evergrande is a big real estate company. They are kind of in a similar situation to the 2007 housing crisis in the States, except the big difference here is that rather than government going through and bailing out the Evergrande group, the Chinese government is like, yeah, we're going to let you self-implode, which is more capitalistic than what America did, ironically, like a free and open market, like you would allow something like that to happen in order for it to never happen again. But it's interesting in juxtaposition, like the CCP isn't making that decision because like, oh, this is how capitalism works. They're making that decision because they're like, we don't like capitalism, and we want to show what will happen to companies that we don't agree with. We'll let them self-implode. So I don't know if like the ban on Bitcoin directly correlates with this, as like they're trying to get rid of capitalistic Western ideals. But I think that's just some thoughts to consider.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I actually have an article pulled up.
Yeah,
I won't share my screen because it's behind a paywall.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I read it earlier. It's on the Wall Street Journal, but it says Xi Jinping aims to rein in Chinese capitalism, hew to Mao's socialist vision. So I think it could plug into like this greater narrative of, maybe this is just a really convenient way for them to get rid of this massive capitalistic institution within their borders, right? And then maybe the Bitcoin ban is part of that as well. That vision. I don't know if that's actually like the way that they're heading, but I think it's just an interesting. Both of them, I think, are pretty consistent with a vision, right? Like I don't think they're kind of opposed to each other in terms of like an ideology, the way that they're moving.
Well, and I think it might allude to the fact too that China doesn't really understand Bitcoin as a whole. You know, if we're zooming out at like the greater picture and they're going through and banning all these capitalistic things, then yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like Bitcoin is one of those things. We need to get rid of it. We don't really understand. We just know it's a currency that people are transacting with, and it has all these Western ideals. So yeah, let's get rid of it. So I don't know. I struggle going back and forth because I hear people argue that all the time. Like China really doesn't understand what Bitcoin is. And then I'm just like, how? Like, how has nobody in the party like raised an alarm bell to like telling like, hey, look at what this asset is?
No, I think they know exactly what it is. Actually, I completely disagree with that. I think that the CCP. I mean, if you look at, you know, if you play Dungeons and Dragons, right, like they are lawful evil, right? They're incredibly organized. They're incredibly high capacity, right? Their state capacity is super high. They execute extremely well. But it's sort of in this end goal of what a lot of people living in the West and around the world would say is probably not a great goal, right? Like authoritarian, it's socialist, right? Those are things that just aren't conducive to freedom. But I think that precisely the reason why they're so they're in such hard opposition to Bitcoin is I think because they understand what Bitcoin means. It empowers the people. It empowers people to take control of their lives and to make decisions for themselves. And I think that's really scary for a regime that relies on basically coercion to run a country. So I think they know exactly what it is. And I think that's why they're so terrified.
I agree with you, Morgan. It's like I feel like they probably understand it better than the United States does. Like it would be my guess. It's just like they're so laser focused in their view, which is so contrarian to Bitcoin, or Bitcoin is so contrarian to their view, is like that is exactly why they're taking these actions. But I mean, it's neither here nor there.
I agree with both of you, Nick and Morgan. I definitely think they 100% understand it. At the very least, they understand what it is, what it represents, and what the net result of it could be. The funny thing about that, though, is I think that the way they run their country, it's put them in a place of arrogance where they don't believe it to be as big a long-term threat as it actually could be, in spite of the actions that they're taking against it. And the reason I say that is because when they let people turn off their miners and transfer their hash rate elsewhere, if they were smart, they would have destroyed the miners, or they would have just taken possession of them, right, for later use or something like that, so that the hash rate couldn't transfer. So I think it puts them in this place of like almost like arrogance, like, oh, that's that little Bitcoin thing. We'll put that down because we are who we are, and we're going to maintain control in our area. So I think they committed. I think they definitely know what it is, but it put them in a position of arrogance that led them to make a long-term mistake, kind of in their quest to put Bitcoin down.
I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on here for a second.
Oh yeah, here we go. I'm excited for that.
I am convinced that there's no way in hell. So let's run with this. Let's run with what everybody's saying here, that like China understands what the asset Bitcoin is. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit, Lawrence, on the long-term play, because I think they know, and so they don't want wealth being concentrated within an individual pocket of people. Like that wealth needs to be within the party. And so when you make a ban like that, like from China, so this is kind of like the 4D chess play, right? So you make the ban against the people. You don't let individuals go out and do like their mining. So rather than like take all that equipment and destroy it, you nationalize it and move it out of the country, find another place where there's cheap power, because we don't, I mean, honestly, like how for certain are we that like all these miners that have moved out of China aren't under state control? Like, where's that money going to? Like, how do we know those wallets don't, like, the government doesn't have access to like the wallets that the mining companies are using? Like, we don't know that.
I agree with that.
Doesn't matter.
And that's the thing, because why would you an entity that operates the way they do, why would they just say, no problem, go elsewhere? I do think there has to be another play there. I hadn't considered the play that you brought up, but I definitely think that that's possible, like, for sure.
So then what's the end game? So if we follow that logic to its conclusion, what is the play?
The end game is that China successfully prevents wealth from distributing amongst their people, which they can't allow that to happen because when in a communist regime, when there are people that have money, that creates power and that creates dissent, essentially, in their regime. So for them, they successfully they oust that out of the population, and now they kind of like, I mean, as the old adage goes, do what I say, not as I do, and that's what China's doing here. Is they're, I think, moving that hash power out, so it looks like it's because, like, I mean, like, let's be honest, like, if the government were to come out and be like, hey, we're mining Bitcoin too, the people are gonna be like, what the hell? Like, we want to mine Bitcoin also, but moving this out of country, now they can like be like, oh, I don't know, it's not ours.
Well, once it's out of the country, it's not that problem, right?
Well,
because if they are socialist,
right,
and like they're just not really interested in what's going on outside their country. I remember the story of there was China was way ahead of Europe in terms of quality of life, right? Like in Europe, it was just a bunch of warring tribes. In China, there was actually like good quality of life or whatever. And then an emperor was like, hey, actually, we're not allowed to build boats with more than 2 masts, right? And that was specifically because they wanted to focus inwards on the country. And that was sort of what, led to the fact that Europe kind of colonized the world, right, for better or for worse. But what it did is it really consolidated a lot of that wealth in European terms. Once it's out of China, right, I think they still kind of have a lot of that perspective where it's like, once it's out of the borders, like, it's not my problem anymore. Like, do whatever you want.
What I'm saying is not really out of the borders. So it's this perceived idea to the general populace that it's out of the borders, but the party themselves really have nationalized those miners and have total access and control to the money. So they're still able to build wealth, which is great for them. That's totally great for them. So it's not going to affect China in any way if the world decides to adopt Bitcoin. But the people that it is going to affect is the miners that were there in China that had like their own individual sovereignty to mine and store Bitcoin. That's who it's going to affect.
You're saying that like the hash is out of the country, but
the hash is out of the country, but
maybe not
the asset, the Bitcoin itself. Like, I mean, that's the insane thing about this mining, right? Is like traditionally when you would mine gold, you would literally like go to a place, dig it up, and then you would have to bring it back to your country physically. Like with Bitcoin, is you can go to another country, mine, and within a matter of a split second, have that money secured in your own wallet.
Yeah. I mean, I think good thing we put on our tinfoil hats, because I think unless we see proof, I think it's just another China FUD, It's like once the hash has left China, the China FUD is still there. Like, I think unless we see proof, I don't think we should worry about it. And honestly, like Bitcoin's gonna do fine without.
And that's pretty much
even if those
Namco says here. He's just like the news that China's banned Bitcoin won't hurt the currency the same way that similar bans to Facebook or Google didn't hurt them. If anything, it strengthens it. If Bitcoin weren't suitable to be used as a currency, either as a store of value or medium of exchange, no government would be going through the trouble to ban it. The fact that China has been taking such severe measures to try and stop Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining showcases how powerful this technology is and how scared the CCP is of its potential. Bitcoin is a tool to fight oppression, and in being so represents a threat to all governments that seek a high level of control over citizens. The open source technology has a potential to dismantle monetary colonialism, unfair policies, and restore world peace by empowering people to reclaim their rights and freedom. Bitcoin is the worst nightmare of all totalitarian governments.
Mic drop.
Mic drop. All right, let's move on to some other parts of the world here, because I know we're kind of stretching on time, and I just want to touch on a couple things here real quick. So we don't have to read through this, but big news. Bitcoin Magazine is opening a bureau in Ukraine. likely in
Let's
in
go.
Kiev, which is huge.
Nice.
Because a large, I think the number, or okay, yeah. So Ukraine is home to the fourth largest population of Bitcoin users in the world, and there's a number of Eastern European countries that just don't really have like an outlet for news source and everything. And considering they're number 4, it's very important to target that population and spread the good word of Bitcoin.
Well, and also, I think Ukraine's been really friendly to Bitcoin. They've been really progressive on like their regulation and just trying to understand this stuff. And if Bitcoin Magazine's, there, right? Like you're gonna have so much talent. There's gonna be so many smart people. It's gonna be great to just have a larger kind of voice for more Bitcoiners, right? Like we can all learn from each other. So this is dope.
Yeah.
It's just one step towards hyper Bitcoinization,
Just planting our flag in every country, right?
Right.
For any listeners, if you have some skill set over in Eastern Europe and you want a job, email Ukraine at bitcoinmagazine.com. They'll get in touch with you if you're a right fit for there. In other news, so country number 3, Panama, I know has been in the news a lot lately. I know they've been gearing up again for legislative bill number 2 to be proposed. I think the first one was back in April and it got shot down by Carlitos Rojas. I believe he was the parliament member that had submitted it. But from what I understand, that guy doesn't have a whole lot of weight to throw around in there. I hear he's in a party that's similar to like the Libertarian Party here in the States. So have you heard what's happening in Panama? Hint, has nothing to do with canals. Haha. A new bill has been presented to legalize cryptocurrency.
Is that the obligatory laugh there?
Yes, obligatory. Let me see if we got. Let me. Nothing. There we go.
Hey.
So a new bill has been presented to legalize cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. In the latest episode of Bitcoin Magazine podcast hosted 2 important figures in the developing story. So those 2 people being Gabriel Silva and Felipe Encandi. I'm slowly saying that wrong. Both.
Don't you speak Spanish?
I do, but I'm reading on the fly, and I'm very bad at doing that. So
okay.
No. He's reading in English.
Reading in English. Speak Spanish, yeah.
But he's reading in English.
You're trying to give us like the
spark
the
notes
total,
on this, yeah.
The gringo
yes,
pronunciation,
yes.
And it's just it's tough. Yeah, I get it.
Anyways, so an entrepreneur is seeking to propel the Panamanian economy forward. Join the show for this fascinating conversation. Yada yada yada. But Panama is becoming an increasingly attractive place for foreign residents. So what we saw happen in El Salvador some months ago when Congress approved the Bitcoin law, and El Salvador said that in a certain way inspired me and inspired many people across the globe. Sharing unique insider insights, Sylvia and Enchandi provided a comprehensive view on Panama's laws, rules around legal tender. So if you want to know more about that, go watch this podcast.
Do we have a draft of this bill yet?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But let me see here. There might be a link in here. No, there's not. I know
because I know like a lot of politicians will be like, oh yeah, it's a Bitcoin bill, like we're doing it. And I think, we just have to wait to see what's actually in the bill before we can kind of judge whether or not.
The problem with the original bill was that like it was literally making like all cryptocurrency legal tender. So like you could go with left sock coin. You could go make left sock coin and then walk into a store and start paying the things for it. So that's really bad.
Yeah.
That's really bad.
That's inflation.
Yeah, that's inflation. At a you're letting the public control inflation. That's not good. But yeah, global news wise, that's about it. So big 3 countries, obviously El Salvador. Next one you want to keep on the list is Ukraine. And number 3 is definitely Panama. Curious, do you guys have any other countries that you think? I know Tonga was in the news for a while. It seems like Lord Fustatu has kind of really fallen out of favor with a lot of Bitcoiners. Regardless of how you feel about Lord, I still think it'd be very cool to see Tonga adopt Bitcoin. So that's another one personally on my list that I've still been keeping an eye on, but I don't know if you guys have any other countries in the works.
I know there were some talks in Mexico, but I don't think it was anything beyond talks, right? I don't think we're actually seeing any concrete action. I think we'll hit a critical mass of countries, especially if they're all geographically located in one area. So I'm looking at South America, right? If we start to get 1, 2, 3, 4 countries, then I think you're going to see the rest of the countries. They're going to say, okay, we need to have at least a conversation about this. We have to have a Bitcoin strategy. The strategy could be, hey, we're going to wait, but at least it becomes a dialogue. And I think it's already become a dialogue in a lot of ways. And so I think it's fine that we only see a couple countries right now. Also, the transparency could just be lacking at the moment. There could be a lot of people who are talking about it who just aren't ready to let everybody know that they're having those conversations. So I have faith.
I feel like maybe not every country is going to go the Bukele way of hopping in Twitter Spaces with the plebs, while
That's
it goes
so
on
cool.
the floor kind of thing. It's
So
like,
cool.
It was awesome to be there, be in that space. But I feel like not everybody's going to operate with that level of transparency for sure. So it'll happen, but I don't think it's going to be like this linear path by any means.
And when it does, I'm going to go travel to all of those countries. I'm already planning on going to El Salvador. I mean, there's surfing down there. That's all you need to say, and I'm there. But the Bitcoin is a bonus. So.
How many countries though are going to Suarez us, right? They're gonna be like Bitcoin, Bitcoin, Bitcoin. And they're going to be like, but here's Lawrence coin.
Yeah, here's Miami coin.
Miami coin. I saw that.
Yeah, it's
I know it's disappointing.
I don't know if I can't talk about a whole lot, but we'll talk facts here. So I know Miami coin.
Talk about conferences going on in Miami.
So obviously Bitcoiners as a whole are not happy with the Suarez announcement of being like very pro Bitcoin, then all of a sudden Miami coin. Bukele did a very similar thing a couple months ago that a lot of people don't recognize. That's being brushed under the rug. I think that's off the table. I'm pretty sure that's off the table. But I know personally, I'm not a fan of Stacks. I don't think Stacks should have a token, and I think it's just another way to kind of gamify the system. But from what I hear, Miami coin is built on top of Stacks, and then Stacks is loosely associated with Bitcoin. So there's some level of Bitcoinery. I don't even want to say that, honestly.
Technically Stacks is built on Bitcoin. Yeah. Technically it's like DeFi for Bitcoin. I was actually at the launch of Miami coin. They were handing out these dope hats, but it is associated with Bitcoin. It is part of the Bitcoin ecosystem. Yeah. Whether or not people think it kind of is aligned with the whole ethos of Bitcoiners is another question. But there's no question that Miami coin and Bitcoin could work together in the future, right? But I think it's fun to give them heat because Miami coin, come on, that's just that sounds like a shit coin.
It's funny, man, because the reason I bring it up is because I never forget one of the videos that I recommend most to people is one called Bitcoin in 90 Minutes by Haas McCook. And, when he was giving his talk, he said very clearly, every country, every place is going to come up with their own shit going. He just nailed it. He's like, it's going to happen just with absolute certainty. You should expect it. So when I saw Miami coin, I was like, he was right.
He was right. Well, but the hats were cool, though. The hats were really cool that they were handing out. So that's what I'll say.
Hats cool, money policy not cool. Not cool.
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's talk about the actual impact. Okay. Right? How much money was it? It was like $5 million, right? But that's great for a city to get an extra a little bit of money. If crypto is actually making an impact, even if it's not Bitcoin right now, I think it just shows governments that they can actually leverage this technology for good. So hopefully it blazes a trail.
Hopefully to Bitcoin eventually, inevitably.
Yeah, I mean that's all roads lead to Bitcoin.
Who's in again Miami coin's not would you consider Miami coin technically a CBDC then?
No, I don't think so because it's not. It's
Lawrence almost he had a look. He's like, actually, Alan, I think you're onto something.
No, I was gonna jokingly say CBDCB if you listen to RHR.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Say, explain it to me, because actually I'm not familiar with the extra B.
Oh, it's a central bank digital cuck bucks.
That's funny. That's funny.
That's the title of the show.
Right.
Right there.
The
Sunday Scaries, CBD, or whatever.
All right, guys. I think this is a good place to wrap up. We've gone way over an hour. I know there's a couple things, article wise, that we didn't get to go over, but we covered a lot of great things. We'll go down the line here. I know, Nick, you and James are working on something pretty cool with the pups. How's that going? You want to talk about it a little bit real quick?
Yeah, it's going well. James and I are both Pitbull owners and advocates, and I used to really not be a dog person, honestly, and I got Zoe, my pit, and she really changed my view on the breed, and I've learned a lot about it over the past few years. So just trying to contribute towards animal welfare and towards kind of breaking down some of those stigmas. So we're writing about it and just highlighting some folks kind of local to us that are contributing towards the animal welfare space. No real connection to Bitcoin at the moment, but we're just trying to think of maybe ways that we might kind of weave the two together. Those two kind of, I guess, groups communities don't really seem to have much of a linkage at the moment, from what I can tell. So we'd love to play a part in that. And so it's Pitbull Partners on Substack. I'm sure I could pull it up. But
Yeah, we should. Alan, you should throw it in the show notes.
I'll throw it in the link. Yeah, I'll throw
Yeah.
it in the description down below, of course.
Yeah.
And then Morgan, appreciate you coming on, man. Morgan's one of the coaches in Pomp's crypto course, very good friend of mine. Where can people go to sign up for the course? And what do you do in particular with your lovely face there?
Yeah, so you can just, if you search Pomp's crypto course, that's kind of where you can find information on it. And where you can find me online is I'm at Twitter at Morgan Hodl or Hodl. I actually copied Alan's Twitter handle because I loved it so much. But at Pomp's crypto course, I'm specifically kind of in charge of some Bitcoin education and in charge of some creator economy education, Lightning Network stuff. And so really just getting people comfortable with Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and getting them jobs in the space. Because I think our fundamental view is the more intelligent driven people that we can find and bring into Bitcoin and crypto, the better off we'll all be, and the happier that they will be at the end of the day, right? If they're working on something they're actually passionate about. So we're doing some great work. We're chugging along. We're going to be starting our next cohort in a couple of weeks here. So check us out if you're interested. And that's about it.
Highly recommend. It's how I met Nick and Morgan. And it's how I got a job with Bitcoin Inc. So class definitely works. Go and take it. You'll meet some awesome people. And lastly, my friend Lawrence here, he is the host of Black and Bullish Tuesdays on Twitter Spaces, but I'll let you talk more about it. Where can we find you on Twitter? And where can we hear your lovely voice throughout the week?
Places a lot. Twitter is definitely the center of my online universe. Handle is Axcapia, AXECAPYA on Twitter. From there, you can link to my space, which is done every Tuesday. We missed last week. I just had parent responsibilities, back to school night. We'll be back this Tuesday. We do it 5 p.m. Eastern on Twitter Spaces, 2 p.m. Pacific. Me and the pleb panel will be hanging out there, similar to what Alan just did, going through the news, and then open discussion afterwards with anybody in the room wants to talk about. And then also on my profile on Twitter there, you can link to my Black and Bullish newsletter that I put out semi-regularly. So, check that out. That's where I do my long form stuff that I just want to pontificate on, because I don't think Twitter is the best format for that. So that's it. And Alan, man, it's been good to see you, man.
It's good to see you.
Since we've seen each other. It's cool hanging out. Yeah, Alan, where can we find you?
Yeah,
dude?
So you guys can find me on Twitter at Alan Hodl as well, similar to Morgan's handle. I spell my name Allen, not ALAN, so don't go looking for that. You can also follow the podcast Twitter at COB Podcast. I've refrained from posting links to Sunday Scaries online because a lot of bots come on. And also, this is the first time we're doing a new format through Riverside. So let us know if you guys liked it, if it worked better. I'm not really sure how this is all going to pan out when I go back and edit it, but I'm excited to be using it. I think audio quality should be a little bit better, although we did have some technical difficulties at the beginning. So I apologize if things are a little bit wonky here for the first go around. Another thing I want to announce real quick is if you're planning on buying tickets for the Bitcoin conference, tickets do go up here in about 2 days. I mean, technically 2 days. So go and buy tickets. They're right now $3.99 for a GA pass. That gets you into 2 days of the conference plus the Sound Money Fest. I believe we're making first lineup announcements here on Tuesday of next week. And I'm telling you, you're not going to be disappointed on the lineup at all. There's something there for everybody, including the comedians, which I'm super excited about. You could also, if you're a Bitcoiner and you're like, hey, I don't care at all about the conference, like I know everything there is to know, like you can just buy tickets for the Sound Money Fest. You know, it's $99 right now. And it gets you a full day of awesome performers, awesome comedians. It gives you access to the convention center so you can go and see all the booths and all the exhibits, art gallery, food hall, everything that we're throwing up for you guys. So you still have access to all that. Highly encourage you go. I mean, regardless, you don't even have to buy tickets. I mean, you can go down there. There's a bunch of parties and stuff that go on down there. It's just a great place to kind of get there, network with other people. The other ticket option is the Industry Day Pass. That's $5.99. That gives you access to one more day of the conference, which is the first day, Industry Day. That's kind of a day for you. If you're interested in wanting to work in the space, it's a networking day. Highly encourage it. A lot of great companies that are going to be there. But get out, buy tickets. Don't be mad when you're buying tickets last second and they're twice the price they are now. So if you're really going to go buy some tickets.
This is the only time that Alan will advocate for a high time preference.
Yes, the only time. The only time. Well, it's very actually, I'm gonna argue that it's very high time preference if you know you're gonna make a decision to put it off. So you're actually saving money now. If you already know you're gonna go, buy it now, stack more sats down the road, live stress free about it. You know, rather than like, oh, I'll wait later. And then like, oh, well, tickets are going to be sold out and they're twice the price. Like, you don't want to worry about any of that.
and Alan, it's close to the beach this year, right?
It is. Like we're literally like walking distance from the beach and everything. So it's in Pride Park. We're where the NFL held their draft last year. And the funny thing, so here's the funny thing. So the heads of the convention center there are comparing us to the Super Bowl event, except the Super Bowl only had half of the convention center rented out. We have the entire convention center rented out, plus all of the entire huge park that's in front of it rented out. So
so not only is it bigger, right?
Way bigger.
There's better events. It's close to the beach.
We got
and
Music Fest.
If you come, Music Fest, maybe you'll see all of our beautiful faces in person. Right?
You definitely will see me there. You definitely will see. Yeah. I'm assuming, I don't want to say yet, but I'm assuming Pomp's course will be there again.
We will be there.
Nick,
I'll be there.
Nick's going to be there.
I'll be there.
Hell yeah.
I think I bought my tickets the last day of the last or like whatever the first second they came out, like the Tuesday after the last.
Hell yeah.
So I'll be there.
Hell yeah. Lawrence, are you going to be there, my man?
I don't know, man. Tell your company to hire me and I'll be there.
Oh, there we go.
Send me your resume. We can get something going in the books for sure. For sure. I'll have to get you a ticket if you're not going, man. I'm going to get you down there one way or another.
Yeah, we'll make it happen.
Shoot or shoot, Lawrence.
Make it happen.
Shoot or shoot.
But yeah, guys, appreciate you coming on. Nick, real quick, I don't think we asked where we could find you on Twitter. What's your handle?
It's NFONSEC_A. It's a little bit, it's NFonseek_A.
Awesome.
It's kind of hard to do like phonetically.
It'll be linked down below. Everything will be linked down below. So we'll be all squared away.
It'll be linked.
But
easy.
All right, guys, stay safe, stack some stats, and have a great weekend.